All right, I think we're recording. Today's workshop, video lecture, whatever, is going to be how to actually prove out your idea. How to know that what you're working on is meaningful, not from a problem standpoint, but now from a solution standpoint. So we're going to talk about MVPs, but more importantly, how to use them. How to use them is by testing them using something we call MVP experiments. This is simply conducting a test or an experiment to find out whether or not your idea is worth pursuing. Because remember, MVPs are very minimal. We're not trying to make something that's going to make us $1 million. We're just trying to learn as much as we can about the solution. So that way, as we improve it and spend more time, focus, energy, effort, money on it, that we're making the right thing and not wasting our time. So if there was an audience here, I would ask you to answer this, but it's going to be more hypothetical here. Which of these two products is better for validating? Meaning, you have an idea for some robot. Obviously, it looks like a little grabber or something. I don't know what this thing does. But you have an idea for this robot. If you wanted to see if that idea is good and people will pay for it, or if people want it, if you should spend your time on it for, many years, build a whole company, which one would you rather have? Would you rather take a year to, really fully build out this prototype so people can use it, get to see exactly what's in your mind? Or would you want, something a little bit more crude, something that takes instant, on no time at all, and where you can instantly kind of get a sketch of it? Um, I'll just spill the answer because you know it here. You want the thing on the left, right? And here's why. Because, I mean, just like looking at it right now, I can tell that just by looking at that sketch that was done instantly, I can almost like 100% understand or perceive at least what it's supposed to be. And if I had an entrepreneur sitting here standing there saying, hey, here's my idea for a device that allows you to do tighten bolts and manufacturing lines. And so this machine is actually just going to go around to all of the different pieces of equipment in a warehouse and start making sure that all the nuts and bolts are screwed in properly. Made it up. Um, that's the idea. And just with that image, just with that sketch on the left, I can tell what that idea is. And if I can perceive just by looking at that what that idea is, I can instantly start offering feedback. I could say, well, that seems like a really expensive device to just be tightening nails or bolts. How often is that an issue? Like I might say I would use this if it were like $10, but I would never pay $10,000 for something like this. Well, now, boom, you've gotten feedback that, oh no, the market doesn't want this idea. The person I thought wanted to buy this, when I showed him a picture of, he was just asking questions and didn't understand why. It would be way better to get that feedback within one day than after a year of building a product. So it's almost better, almost always better, to do something quicker and more crude, more imperfect, as long as it is enough for you to get feedback on your idea. You might pivot this machine around and, a year later, it looks completely different than what you had envisioned. And if you would have built that robot on the right before learning any of that, you would have wasted a whole year just to find out that nobody was going to buy it. Maybe somebody does want to buy it and you got lucky, but wouldn't you have rather known a day in? You could show somebody that sketch and ask them to put in an email, ask them to put in a pre-order, something to prove that this idea is worth it. So the question I would ask is what is an MVP? Why do we use them? Many of you, if you're watching this, probably understand. Sorry. Probably understand that an MVP is a minimum viable product, not most valuable player, as a lot of people not in entrepreneurship would guess. The reason we use them isn't because this is our final product. No, it'll be ugly, it'll be imperfect. The reason we do this is so we can learn. As you can see, we build an MVP, we measure the results, and then we learn from it so we can build the next one. That is the point of an MVP. You're not building an MVP so you can have a product. You're building an MVP so you can learn about your concept of the product that you want to deliver. Really, it's the smallest thing you can build that allows you to start learning from real users. So yes, it would be highly, highly, highly accurate feedback we get on that device that takes a year, but it is not worth a year to get there when we can get a bulk of that learning in a fraction of the time. These are just like so that we're grounded on MVPs. Here's a bunch of examples of different types of MVPs. So, for instance, as you get near the bottom, these are very, very abstract, very minimal. Things like a napkin sketch or a basic video explaining what the product would be. But as you get more towards the top of that spectrum, you're getting very close to a fully built out point, meaning that if you finally break over that top line, you officially have a product that's launched and probably earning revenue. If you are below the bottom of that line, it's probably just a thought in your head and it's not a real MVP. It's just a thought. Feel free to pause this, look at these. Happy to explain any of this. I don't want to spend too much time on it though. One thing I think is interesting is thinking about MVPs like this, quick, iterative, faster. It helps you think through the product differently, where you are not taking a series of unimportant steps or irrelevant steps to get to an end product. But instead, every step along the way needs to be valuable. Meaning, say I wanted to had an idea for a car, right? And I'm starting with this year out end vision, and I spend a whole year building it. Well, every step along the way, you see, well, at the beginning I just have a tire, and then I have just have, a tire with a frame. Like nothing along the way is something that users would buy or use. Whereas like maybe if you were grounded on the idea of transportation, what's the easiest thing we could do? Well, just two wheels and a board, that's a skateboard. Add a handle, that's a scooter. Add pedals, that's a bike. Add a motor, that's a motorcycle. Make it bigger and fit more people, now you got a car. It's a series of iterations that got them to the end vision, the same end vision, but in a way that their little steps along the way were able to provide some value, right? I think about this just like evolution. So Charles Darwin introduced natural selection. And one of the core important things about evolution is that nothing will just appear in a species that is not meaningful. Meaning, like let's say eyeballs. Eyeballs are super important, super complex. But if the very first eyeball wasn't fully cooked and didn't work yet, it would have never actually evolved. Meaning you wouldn't just start growing these like fleshy organs or whatever eyes are, if they didn't provide any value until it was completely built. I hope this makes sense. Like every step along the way needs to provide an advantage. Like I guess I hope this makes sense, but for instance, you might wonder why a certain bird got such a long beak. It wasn't like the food that bird needed required a long beak, and it had to slowly get a longer beak over multiple millions of years. Because if the beak didn't provide any value being a little bit longer, well, it would have never gotten a little bit longer to begin with to get to the end point of being a really long beak. So what that means is like when one bird's beak was a little longer, that little length of beak was enough to provide it an advantage. And so it proliferated, had more kids. And then maybe the beaks got a little bit longer, piece by piece, until finally, yeah, you have this super long beak that can reach hard to reach things. But it only got there because having a slightly longer beak over each unique generation provided more and more value until it reached a point of, enormous value, you might say. I hope that makes sense. Super, super important. The point of an MVP is to test your solution in a quick and iterable way. The key word here is test. Just having and building an MVP, a lot of people understand an MVP and then they go and build one. But that is literally useless, I guess, if you are not learning from it, if you are not testing it. Because the way you learn from MVPs is by testing it with experiments. So there's ingredients to an MVP experiment. What does that mean? It means, well, first you need the MVP, right? So what type of MVP is it? What's the form? Is it a website landing page? Is it a commercial? Is it a product demo? Is it something that actually works a little bit like what we call semi-functional test object? What type of MVP is it? Next up, now that you've built that, what are you even trying to learn? Because an MVP isn't probably going to do all things. It's the point. It's minimum. So, like in the instance of that robot, the MVP might be what you might be trying to learn is that there's interest around like the actual concept of there being a robot that can tighten bolts. That's what you're trying to learn. You're not trying to learn if it works. You're not trying to learn if people would pay a certain price point. You just want to know, here's the concept. It's a robot that will tighten screws around the warehouse. Um, that's what I'm trying to prove, that people find that interesting. Because if so, I'm going to keep building it and I'm going to keep, testing it. But if not, I need to pivot. And then finally, how will I actually know if the thing I'm testing is proven correct or wrong? What will indicate success? So the metrics that you're seeking, are you looking for a certain amount of people who go through your MVP experiment to actually sign up for the thing? Are you trying to test if people will click on an ad? Um, Join an email list, something like that. How are you going to measure success? It's also important to just think about things like sample size. How many people do you need to actually interact with this MVP to learn from it? Sometimes it might be more, sometimes it might be less. Transparency is another consideration, meaning are you letting them know that this is an MVP experiment, or are you, sort of keeping that fact from them so that they act in an unbiased way, perhaps? Um, if you have any questions about that, please reach out. Now, I'm literally, we're just jumping straight in. I'm gonna run through some examples of MVP experiments. I wish I had added a caveat that you could just skip to this point if you already know all that stuff. But these are real student examples of MVP tests and experiments that they have run to prove their idea. So starting with Closet Club. Closet Club was an idea of a company where, different people on campus could rent out their closets to other people on campus. So if I had a really cool IU vintage coat, I could put it up for people to rent for $25 for a day, where maybe they can wear it to the game, the football game, whatever, the tailgate party, something like that. There's all sorts of assumptions around this business, all sorts of like things that could have went well or could have went wrong. Plenty of judges who said, well, what if will people actually pay? How would you know that somebody's gonna let a stranger wear your clothes? Wear their clothes. Do people really want strangers to be borrowing clothes from their closet, even if they are earning money? There were tons of assumptions. So what did they do? They made like a Google form where anyone could upload a picture of a apparel item and a price that they would want to rent it at or sell it at. And they basically sort of Wizard of Oz compiled all of these pieces, these shirts, boots, hats, whatever, and threw it onto a website where people could essentially go and indicate that they wanted to rent or buy any of these clothes. They basically just built a basic marketplace of a static landing page that they populated using Google Form submissions. And yeah, it worked. The assumption they were testing was there demand to rent or lease clothes. Would people pay money just to have clothes temporarily? Would somebody let a stranger borrow their clothes? Can they actually handle pickup, drop off logistics? Can they figure out pricing? Could they figure out the likelihood of clothes getting damaged in the process or not getting returned? And what is the average delivery distance? There was so much to learn here through conducting this. And of course, they had plenty of metrics to measure success. How many items got listed? Did anyone actually rent these items? How did the process go for delivering these items, et cetera, et cetera. The result is they ended up getting $1,000 in revenue as a result of the experiment, with over 100 items being listed on their website, which is, I think, a great win, especially for an MVP experiment. One of the crown jewels of an MVP is if you actually get people to earn, pay money for it. That's wonderful. Um, it wasn't easy. Like we said, this is a Wizard of Oz MVP. There was no app, there was no software. They didn't have delivery drivers or pickup people. No, these were two girls who loaded up their car and drove all around, picked up all the items, and manually handled the exchange. If you wanted to buy a clothes, you'd have to Venmo them, and then they would Venmo the other person, and they would collect like $5. So that way, if you didn't return the item, they got to keep that $5 and all the different things. They had to very, very manually conduct this process, but they proved some of the core assumptions. People were interested in paying money to rent clothes. In fact, they learned what percentage was rental versus buys. They learned that people were willing to lease out their closet. They got 100 people to put up items. They proved that, clothes weren't going to get ruined on like a very frequent basis. Across all of the exchanges they didn't have anybody with get stains on the clothes or not return the clothes. They learned so much from doing this experiment. Here's a wonderful one. I like this as an example because this is great. Their Collabosys, the idea was helping students get micro internships, right? If you have skills, you want to develop skills, you could join a startup for a simple project and to be able to build your skills. And it also pairs startups with like just-in-time support from college students who are willing to work for free or low pay. Um, for this MVP experiment, this is a great MVP. He just created a fake ad, or really it's a real ad, but for a fake company. He created an ad that would promote this startup. Ironically, though, the startup didn't exist yet. There was no real company. There was no matching algorithm or platform. However, he wanted to see, are people interested in this? Will people try and sign up to get an internship? What are the click-through rates? Is paid ads a viable strategy? Can they generate viable unit economics? So, classic experiment, you run an ad, he put 89 bucks on it, and he says, how many people will click on this link because they're interested? How many people actually sign up on the website, and how many people will click to the website but then just bounce? It was amazing. I think he got uh yeah, I don't know what, 3 direct signups, 30 students, and 5 startups. I can't remember exactly what that means, but yeah, he got like a $17 acquisition cost, meaning for every $17 of ads he spent, he got somebody to actually sign up for his platform. He had a click-through rate that was double the average of LinkedIn, meaning that people were more interested in his ads than the average ad. And he was able to use the data from those ads to find out that it was computer science and data science students who are most interested in the internships. Boom. With this MVP experiment, not only did he find his click-through rate, not only did he establish unit economics, not only did he prove that people even cared about this idea because they signed up for it, but he also established his target demographic, his early customer. This one's super, unique, so I love it. There was a student, Kevin, this company colleague. The idea was he was going to pair high school seniors with scholarships and esports team opportunities. So he meant to be like a recruitment platform for esports college programs and a place where collegiate esport athletes could be seen, get recruited, etc. Um, but even though his company's a website, but his MVP was to put up a pop-up experiment. He hosted a tournament. So tournaments are not what his company is, but a tournament was an experience that allowed him to pull a bunch of his target audience into a event together, upon which he can then conduct this experiment and promote his idea and see how many people actually end up converting into users. So what I mean is he literally hosted a Rocket League tournament. I don't know exactly, yeah, over 200 participants. Okay. And then while they're brought together by this gravity of an exciting event, he was able to say, hey, for anybody who's looking for scholarships, here's my website. You can sign up today. It's completely free. And boom, he got tons of students to sign up. Like I said, he got 200 participants. So he proved that market tournaments might actually be a good go-to-market strategy for him had he launched his company. Uh, in fact, maybe it could be a whole business model that he can add because he found out that he could earn sponsorship dollars. So he got an esports team to sponsor this tournament. And he even got one of the participants of this tournament to get connected to a 50% full ride tuition scholarship, which is incredible for esports. So I love this because it's just creative thinking about how can you uniquely use MVPs or experiments, even if, it's not intuitive. It may not be intuitive to put on a tournament when you're not a company who puts on tournaments, but he is an esports company and tournaments are big in esports. So we leverage that. Similarly, I have an app for musicians. Maybe I could host a local concert that is all full of just local musicians. And then during that concert, I say, hey, here's the new app. If you're here today, you can use this discount code to get it for free or whatever, right? That would be a wonderful way to test my landing page or to test my MVP in whatever capacity it is at that moment. Another thing about him, he had another great MVP that he did, which is he actually created the first ever like power rankings or like ESPN one top 100 ranking type thing for esports. So he was coming up with rankings for the best senior recruits for Rocket League for different esports. And he was able to get hundreds of thousands of views on Twitter just posting these rankings, which brought a lot of traffic to his website, which then brought a lot of people to actually convert. Even though this is just like an MVP, it wasn't his actual product. It was just something he could do earlier, easier, quicker, faster to learn about whether or not people are interested in his core value proposition. So love that. This one's me. This one's me. It's a classic experiment. It's the crowdfunding campaign. Can you use MVPs to actually get people to pre-order your thing? So I'll tell you, I did this way later than I probably should have or could have. Did this way later than I needed to. I could have done this so much sooner and gotten a lot of value from it, but I did eventually do it. And yeah, with nothing but a commercial, so like a video, a demo of our app, which was very well designed. It was very like if we were looking at that rankings earlier of like very minimum MVP to a maximum MVP, this was more on the maximum side. I went all out for a cool commercial. We ran ads. We had a demo of the product, all on a crowdfunding campaign. The assumptions I was testing is would people pay for this? Are ads a viable strategy? And then very, very simply, I will know it worked if I got people giving me money. Um, and boom, we end up getting ranked #1 in ops on Kickstarter. I received a positive ROAS, which confirmed unit economics. I found out I had a high click-through rate. I was getting decent conversions. And the end result is we got $12,000 in pre-orders before the app was fully built. In fact, I could have, like I said, I could have done this crowdfunding campaign a whole year sooner. We didn't need any product. We just needed some mock-ups of the design and the vision in that video, and boom, we could have raised $12,000 from real users, real people who want to use our product. Wonderful validation, wonderful experiment, and very realistic. Another one I did just to show how minimal it could be. Like literally, see that sign? Are you a musician? Ask for a chance to win $200 gift card. That is an MVP. Seems like it's like we're getting very abstract here. But that is an MVP because I paired it with things like another commercial and a basic sell sheet. So by using this big eye-catching poster, I was able to catch people who identified as a musician who would then come and engage with our MVPs to hopefully produce a result, which in this case was a sign up for the app. So they see the sign. Are you a musician? Yes, I am. They come. They interface with my MVP, which was a commercial and a sell sheet. And then I ask them, if you're a musician, will you sign up for this? Are you interested in using this? So the assumption is based on very basic materials, pen and paper, one sell sheet, a little basic commercial I shot in my basement. Will musicians sign up just from this basic explanation of the concept? While we were at it, we used it for other learning opportunities too. We said, who's our target demographic? How can we use this experiment to learn better about who our target customers are? So we recorded what instrument they play and then what percentage of those people signed up. We found a lot of people who were playing piano, guitar, the basic instruments were the ones that had the highest conversion. People who played something like a violin or a cello, they were less likely to convert. Um, and yeah, I think that, we learned a lot. We learned that, an overwhelming majority of the musicians signed up. Uh, I think an important thing to note is that a lot of these good experiments, you don't just run them once and you're done with them. You could do this multiple times. So I actually did this twice. Once at IU's campus and once at a global conference. The first time we got 50 signups, second time we got 130 signups, which is greater than 60% conversion of the musicians we talked to. So that's great. Um, very, very basic stuff. I could have made all the materials in this MVP experiment, I could have made in a matter of a couple days. Seriously. And look at the results I can yield from just a couple days of effort. A couple days of MVPing, building very, very basic MVPs. I get 180 signups. I prove conversion. I know what instruments they play. I know what age they are. I know a lot more about my user and my value prop from doing this. Just chugging along here. We have like two more examples or three more examples. You can tune out anytime if you feel like you get this, but this is valuable to just go through more examples. GradMeet was another company. The idea was getting recent college grads to meet new friends in new cities. So if you graduate from IU and you move to Chicago, you could use GradMeet to actually find new friends, connect with people at events. So even though his thing is an app that connects people for events, the way he MVP'd this by throwing an actual event. And the idea with his app is it was going to ask more about their personality and then help pair them with the right people. Well, he just made a manual personality quiz. It's like a semi-functional test object. And he had people fill it out. He paired them with others at this event, and he drove traffic to his landing page for people to sign up. And he also, in the process of throwing this event, ran Instagram ads to see can he use ads to bring people to the event? Can he use ads to generate new customers? Tons of MVP forms, tons of things he can learn here by doing this. And I think all of them he learned across the board, right? Are recent grads even willing to come to these events? Because that's a huge assumption. If his app is ever going to be successful, it means that people will actually show up to an event with strangers. So before he goes and builds the actual app, he just needs to find out, will people come to a social event to meet other people for that intended goal? The answer was yes. He got 122 recent grads to attend an event. He had an average of three new friends made. You know, he surveyed them and did you meet anyone? What are their names? People on average met three new people, and he got all of them to sign up for his app. So this is a great experiment, great MVPs, great use of an MVP. And he learned a lot more through running those ads too. He was able to get complete strangers to see an Instagram ad and actually show up to this event, which is huge, improving the viability or feasibility of this actually working out as a company. Um, This is another great example for physical products or like food products in this case. We had student Josh, he wanted to make cottage cheese last year. So I was sad, like there's literally no better experiment you could do than to make this cheese and have people taste it. But let's make it a little bit more experimental. So what he did is he actually took his leading competitors and then he took his cottage cheese he made and he had people test them at farmers markets or at tabling events, but without knowing which one was his product and which one was the other product. He had them simply rank uh the flavors, you know. I think this is a 5 out of 10, this one's a 3 out of 10, this one's a 10 out of 10. I love it, you know. And the goal is hopefully that his cottage cheese can be as good, if not better, than the leading competitors in the market. So his assumptions, will people even like his cottage cheese? He can also show them the nutrition facts before they taste it and say, you know, based on the nutrition facts in the packaging, which one would they choose? How does this compare to the other competitors in the market? So his metrics are, you know, will he get people to join a wait list? Will people give him like a high score, like an 8 out of 10 on flavor? And uh, do people choose his nutritional facts over the other nutritional facts without tasting it, right? Multiple things you can test here. And to be honest, it went great because he learned a lot, but it went bad in the sense that, you know, he learned that people didn't like it, which is amazing. I'm glad that he did this. If he had spent a whole year just making cottage cheese and then packaged up 200 packages of it after finding a manufacturer and he gets it labels printed and he gets Kroger to sell them and then all of a sudden everybody hates the taste of it, that'd be horrible. So I'm glad that he, you know, went out and he ended up going through like 30 batches of cottage cheese that got notably better tasting with each passing individual MVP experiment to the point that he validated his packaging, the nutrition facts, but not the flavor. Ended up getting the flavor to improve, and he grew an email wait list. So great experiments around the blind taste test. Um, One more. This one's awesome. Pitch deck. This is like a good example of how MVPs don't need to be targeted towards making money. They need to just be about proving certain assumptions. So they made this sort of like an offer they can't refuse. What their product was is these little bins that go on urinals, like you can see in that image. And so that way, instead of throwing gum or Zins down the urinal, they'll just put it in there, and that will prevent janitors from having to pick their hands in the urinal. It will prevent, you know, damage to the pipes, et cetera, et cetera. They actually didn't want to, they weren't ready to prove, it wasn't time to prove whether or not restaurants would buy this. If they had went and tried to get people to pay money for this, they might have not gotten any sales. They might have only gotten into one bar. But that's not the goal. The goal is to see, is this even valuable? So they really wanted to get in as many bars as possible to get proof of concept out. So they went up to bars and they offered them a free installation of these devices into their establishment in the bathrooms, and then they would just go in and check on Saturdays. Like I think one time they even just sat at the bar all night, and every time someone walked in the bathroom, they would walk in and see how people would interact, like almost like an observer. Were people making jokes about them? Did people say that that's cool? Were people using them? In fact, they even took a few Zens and put them in there just to see the idea for other people that this is how they're meant to be used. So, will bars even allow these to be installed? Will people actually use them effectively? And will it save bar employees time? These are some of the questions that they had. Well, they found that, first of all, the janitors and the people who clean the bathrooms loved them. They made it easier. Um, they found out that bars were willing and, in fact, were pretty interested in it. Uh, In fact, they even had one bar offer to pay for one. They're like, hey, well, I'll buy these. I'll buy these to put in my bathroom. So they ended up getting accidental revenue. Accidental revenue. That's an amazing thing that happened on the MVP. Um, in fact, there was even Kilroy's where the only bathroom where they didn't install these, they wound up having urinals get clogged from Zins and gum, and it shut them down for like a week, that bathroom. Wonderful, wonderful validation on this MVP experiment. And it was just raw hustle and grit of them getting in front of people and installing these and being very entrepreneurial and scientific about how they test them. So now, if you're watching this and you made it this far, your turn. Experiments are not meant to be all or nothing. You're supposed to do these multiple times with multiple MVPs and always be learning. And in fact, the same experiment you can run more than once to see if the results are the same or if they're different. So, design 3 MVP experiments. This requires you to think through what type of MVP you can make, what are you trying to learn from it, and how are you going to measure success. Go design 3 of them, reach out to me on Slack me what your ideas are, and let's talk about them. This is essential. If you do this and you do it well, you can make sure that you're actually building a product that people will want and not that people don't care about, right? To return it all the way back to the front here. Let's not spend a year to build this robot just to find out people don't like it. Let's find out with a sketch that people love the concept. And then let's make a video of an animation of how it would work. And then let's start to get some basic robotics that don't look very sexy. They're not designed at all. They're just meant to work. And then finally, we'll have that finished robot. But we'll only have gotten to that point if every step along the way, the validation was good and people were vibing with the MVP, right? That's how we get to a product that people care about. That's how we validate our ideas and not waste time. Thank you, everybody. Reach out to me if you have any questions. Um, this is crucial. This is crucial, y'all. Have a good one. We're still recording. Whoops. All right, peace.